In the headlines this evening, the floor leaders of Korea's main rival parties hold a three-way meeting with the family members of April's ferry disaster victims. Will this break the parliamentary deadlock? Is the next question in line. Thousands of pro-democracy demonstrators block Hong Kong's main business district. This following violent clashes with police that left dozens injured over the weekend. And we have today's as well as the weekend highlights from the 2014 Incheon Asian Games. Stay tuned for these stories and more on Early Edition at 6.
It's 6 p.m. on Monday, September 29th here in Korea. Hello and welcome to the newscast. I'm Daniel Chen.
And I'm Hyun-kyung. Thanks for joining us for Early Edition at 6. We begin at the National Assembly again this evening, where floor leaders of the rival parties as well as family members of the victims of April's ferry disaster met in an apparent attempt to normalize parliamentary proceedings.
And for the latest, Arirang's National Assembly correspondent Ji Myung-kil joins us on the line. Myung-kil, fill us in.
Good evening. There hasn't been an official statement yet from either of the rival parties, but what I've been hearing is that there hasn't been much progress to speak of from the trilateral meeting. There was word at one point that there was going to be a press conference or an announcement at 5 p.m., but that didn't take place. The full leader of the ruling Central Party, Lee Won-gu, and the full leader of the main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, Park Young-sun, have left the meeting room. They are now awaiting word on the results from the meeting taking place behind closed doors of representatives for terror ferry victims. We presume not much of a breakthrough will be made at today's trilateral meeting, which many hoped would set the stage for parliamentary normalization. At this point, it is hard to say whether the opposition party will agree to participate in a plenary session scheduled for tomorrow.
Myung-kil, now that three-way meeting came after a bilateral meeting between the floor leaders of the two rival parties took place. So what were some of the focal points from those talks earlier in the morning?
Yes, Hyun-kyung, the ruling Central Party full leader Lee Won-gu met with his counterpart Park Young-sun of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy this morning. Both relayed respective stances to one another on how to deal with the special terror ferry bill and how to normalize parliamentary affairs. Those talks ended after both full leaders were not able to bridge their differences, but they returned about an hour later where they agreed to the trilateral talks with the representatives for the families of terror ferry victims.
Well, Myung-kil, we know a plenary session is scheduled for tomorrow, but we still don't know if opposition lawmakers will be present there. What's the ruling party stance on that?
Well, Daniel, the ruling party is firm on the session being convened as scheduled, even without the opposition. Assembly Speaker Chung Mi-hwa adjourned the plenary session last Friday on the opposition party's request, but he'll go ahead with tomorrow's session regardless of whether opposition lawmakers are in attendance. Chung said that apart from the some 90 draft bills that need to be passed tomorrow, he also urged the review of other 30 pending bills related to the economy and improving the livelihoods of the people. The ruling Central Party has made it clear that it will not accept any more requests for delays to open the plenary session. I'll be back with more updates for the later newscast. This is Ji Myung-kil reporting live from the National Assembly.
Let's move on to a different topic. What doesn't break you will make you stronger. Discipline. That's some of the elements in Korean society that's always been a fine line between discipline and abuse sometimes when it comes to physical punishment.
That's right. But whether thin or thick, that line will now come with a hefty sentence. Our Kwon So-ah has more.
The Korean public was outraged earlier this year over a series of cases in which women physically abused their stepdaughters to death. Despite the severity of their actions, the two offenders were punished with 10 and 15 years in prison, respectively. The cases and others like them prompted the country to strengthen the laws against child abuse. Before the law was revised, people found guilty of abusive actions that resulted in the death of a child received a minimum of 3 years in prison with a possibility of suspended sentence. Under the new law, a convicted offender will get a minimum 5-year sentence and could face life in prison. A parent who physically harms their child could also have their parental rights deprived, and the punishments for child care workers who are found guilty of violent acts will be strengthened. Adults who suspect abuse will now be required by law to report their suspicions to police or relevant agencies. Those in positions of power, such as teachers and child care workers, will face fines of up to 5 million won, or roughly $4,800 for failing to do so. Child welfare experts welcome the changes, but say cooperation with related organizations will be necessary for them to be effective. They also point out that there is a lack of manpower at child protection centers in the nation. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
In other news, amid signs of warming bilateral ties, the vice foreign ministers from Korea and Japan will meet for talks later this week. Seoul's foreign ministry says its first vice minister Cho Tae-yong will travel to Tokyo this Wednesday for the 13th round of strategic dialogue. Cho and his Japanese counterpart Akitaka Saiki will address a range of pending bilateral issues, including North Korea. They are also expected to discuss the details of a possible summit between their leaders, which some speculate could take place in November on the sidelines of the APEC summit in Beijing.
The diplomatic tensions between South Korea, China, and Japan are complicating the resumption of the six-party nuclear disarmament talks. That's according to former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, Kurt Campbell. Arirang's Hwang Sung-hee has this exclusive interview.
In the past, the biggest problem six-party was just to get North Korea to come to the table. But now we have a whole host of very difficult bilateral issues in Asia that might complicate getting back to the table. So as a result, I think we've got to be open to other frameworks and other discussions. At the heart of that, in my view, is a recognition that the driving force behind diplomacy with North Korea increasingly has to be South Korea. I think given South Korea's increasing stature, its remarkable performance, it is only right that they take a leading role in the politics and diplomacy around the status of its own peninsula.
Do you think a new momentum can be found through a bigger role by China?
I'm one of those people that believe that the key, subtly and strategically, to unlocking some of the problems on the Korean peninsula is an improving relationship between South Korea and China. And in fact, if anything, the country that has undermined China's security, has created real problems for Beijing, is not the United States, but their dear friends North Korea. And I think they're coming to recognize that. And the more that South Korea and China work together, the more likely it is that China will risk putting more pressure on North Korea because they know they have a country that they can work with in South Korea.
Wouldn't a strong South Korea-China ties hurt the trilateral relationship between the United States, South Korea, and Japan?
I think it's a good thing that China and South Korea are working more closely together. I am hurt and saddened by what's going on between Japan and South Korea, and I'd like very much to see steps being taken on both sides to improve the relationship. And I know how difficult it is. And I also am of the view that the United States could do more to help that process along. So I think what we want are improving constellation, web of bilateral relations. I think that will help us in Asia.
There are criticisms that Washington's strategic patience policy on North Korea has led to a bigger, more developed North Korean nuclear program. What's your take on that?
We've done everything we can to pose to North Korea that it faces a fundamental choice. It can have better relations with the West, more integration, more economic support, or it can live as exile and outcast as a nuclear state. Choose one of the two. But I think we've learned, at least from most of our experience, that North Korea does not want to relinquish its nuclear weapons. And that's fundamentally at odds with our strategic diplomacy.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. It's my honor. Thank you very much.
It's time for this week's Industry Insight, and today we are going to talk about the next evolution in mobile technology.
Right, global sales of smartwatches, glasses, and fitness bands are expected to top $3 billion this year. But could those knock the smartphone off its perch?
Well, here's our Connie Kim with more.
With many believing that the smartphone market is already reaching maturity, there's a new kid on the block: wearables. Currently in its infancy stage, the market value of wearables is forecast to more than double over the next 4 years. So what can consumers expect next? Take a look. Leave your smartphone in your pocket, and with a smartwatch on your wrist alone, you can make calls, send emails, monitor your health, and stay fit. That's what the future holds for us. That's if wearables really take off. It started with Google Glass. With a voice command, the miniature computer in the upper right corner vision will take pictures, record video and audio, and search for a location. Samsung, wanting to get out in front of Apple, came out with Galaxy Gear, although pretty prematurely, many would say. And the highly anticipated Apple Watch and LG G Watch R were unveiled earlier this month. But the question is, would you wear it every day? It may be fun to show off to your friends for a day or two, but it's currently a hard sell to non-techies. And that's where the fashion industry comes in. Google's partnered up with designer Diane von Furstenberg to offer a set of stylish frames and clip-on shades. Apple is working with Burberry and high-end watchmaker Tag Heuer in a move to go stylish. But fashion is only the start. The short battery life of wearables is another factor that could turn off consumers.
In order to become part of our daily lives, the battery life needs to be extended. Battery technology is currently catered to the auto industry. Bendable, flexible, and stretchable batteries that can fit into wearables need to be developed.
The small display screens are another issue in a world where size does matter. The solution may come in the form of holograms or virtual displays controlled by voice command.
Interface will increasingly be voice as opposed to text, largely because you can speak to a wearable device and not be limited by the size of the keyboard. So that really is the future, I think.
From smartphones to now smartwatches and glasses, the technology is poised to be all around us in the near future, whether through smart homes, smart cars, or even smart shoes. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
We are now into the second week of the 17th Asian Games. For the latest coming out of Incheon, we now connect live to Arirang's Song Ji-sun at the News Center.
So, Ji-sun, after an exciting weekend of finals and many team events like archery and baseball, it looks like Monday was a slower day in terms of action.
It was, but actually we're getting medals that are very valuable in terms of gold medals in Korea's athletic history. We're just getting a report that Korea's men's duo team earned the first gold medal in 28 years. Ji Myung-kil and Hyun-kyung beat the Indian duo with a score of 2-0 to mark a new gold medal in 28 years. We'll get back to that in our later newscast. And it's been raining on and off the whole day throughout this peninsula, which postponed a number of events, including the canoe events, by an hour. When the action did pick up, Korean athletes picked up some more medals on the water. Korea's 20-year-old paddler Cho Kwang-hee picked up the gold in men's kayak single 200-meter sprint, Korea's first gold in the event in 24 years. The Korean women's team earned a silver in the kayak 4 500-meter sprint, while Lee Sun-ja won a bronze in the women's single 500-meter. In indoor action on the pole, the high school duo of Kim Young-nam and Woo Ha-ram took the silver in men's synchronized 10-meter platform diving.
And the talk of the town still making headlines is from the weekend for most Koreans. It was Sunday's baseball final in between South Korea and Chinese Taipei, especially because it wasn't so dominating as many had expected. The Korean players have been as they were in the preliminaries compared to the preliminaries.
Right, it was a roller coaster ride for the players and the thousands of fans who gathered into the stadium to cheer them on for the gold. Now, Chinese Taipei had a 3-2 lead going into the 8th inning. But after Park Byung-ho walked out, Kang Jung-ho's hit by pitch tied the game for Korea. Na Sang-bom's grounder to second gave Korea the 4-3 lead, and Hwang Jae-gyun then hit a 2-run single to right to seal this victory. Korea kept it that way to the last inning, 6-3, winning their second straight Asian Games gold and fourth in total.
Well, congratulations to the players who were granted a pardon from military service. 2 more years of pro career for them. And we have only 5 days remaining now. What are some of the events that we should look out for tonight, Ji-sun?
Right, we have more gold medal events tonight, and 2 players from badminton superpower China will fight out for the gold in the men's single. Those are 2-time Olympic single champion Lin Dan, who will play against teammate Chen Leung, who won the bronze in the London Olympics 2 years ago. In women's football, the semis will be the most crucial match in deciding who will take the gold at this year's Asian Games. The 2 hottest favorites for the gold are South Korea and North Korea, who will play each other tonight in the semifinal. That game kicks off at 8 p.m. Korea time at Munich Stadium, and this will be the last match that Korea's first ever female English League player, Chelsea ladies Ji So-yeon, can play for the Korean squad as she has commitments at the famous London club.
Full-time national team players and, of course, full-time professional athletes, a really hard balancing act for them.
That's right. Well, thank you very much, Ji-sun, for the updates as always. That was our Song Ji-sun at the News Center. One-day entry ban. 77.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Hyun-kyung and Daniel Choy.
Arirang News. Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
People in Hong Kong woke up to a rough start of the week as thousands of pro-democracy protesters clashed with police into the early morning hours on Monday. The situation has somewhat gotten under control, but crowds of people still remain on the streets, resolute in their demands. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
Thousands of protesters continue to occupy major streets in the heart of Hong Kong. The crowds have now somewhat thinned out, but many roads leading to the city's financial district remain blocked off as protesters ignore warnings from authorities who say the demonstrations are illegal. The Hong Kong Information Services Department says more than 36 people have been injured in clashes. Riot police have used tear gas and pepper spray on the protesters, many of whom wore goggles, ponchos, and held up umbrellas to protect themselves. Fresh protests have also broken out in the shopping district of Causeway Bay and in Mong Kok. Hong Kong's chief executive has called on citizens not to believe what he called rumors of police violence.
I hope citizens can keep their calm and not falsely believe in these rumors. The police are working hard to maintain social order, which includes the free flow of traffic. They are also protecting public safety and have exercised great restraint during their operations.
The Occupy Central movement on Sunday follows a week of student-led protests which are demanding universal suffrage in the city's first chief executive election in 2017. The demonstrators want to be allowed to directly vote for top city officials rather than Beijing-vetted candidates. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
A 7th round of free trade negotiations between Korea and Vietnam began today in Seoul. Representatives from the 2 sides will meet for the next 3 days where they will discuss issues ranging from products, services, and investment. The 7th round of talks come after both Korea and Vietnam expressed an interest in concluding negotiations and signing the FTA by the end of this year. Now, discussions over the bilateral free trade pact first started 2 years ago. Vietnam was Korea's 9th largest trading partner last year.
Korea posted a current account surplus for the 30th straight month in August, but the margin was down from the previous month. The Bank of Korea says last month's surplus stood at nearly $7.3 billion, which is down nearly $600 million from the July figure. Analysts attribute the one-month drop to seasonal factors such as the nation's tourism deficit expanding as many Koreans opted to travel overseas for summer vacations. Including August, Korea's current account surplus during the year has totaled more than $54 billion. The central bank forecasts the cumulative surplus for the entire year to be around $84 billion. Thousands of delegates from more than 190 nations have converged on the Korean city of Pyeongchang for an international convention on biodiversity. Many issues will be discussed, among them living modified organism products, or LMOs. Sounds new? Well, according to our Shin Se-min, there's a good chance you've already eaten food containing them.
Potatoes, corn, tomatoes, and beans. Just a portion of the produce we consume on any given day without a second thought. But what you may not know is that you could be eating produce that comes with a twist in its genetic material. Living modified organisms, or LMOs as they are called, are living organisms that possess genetic material obtained through the use of modern biotechnology. More than 12% of the world's agricultural land is being used to cultivate LMO products. In Korea last year, more than 8.8 million tons of LMO products were imported, according to the Korea Biosafety Clearinghouse. Although genetically engineered products like LMOs and GMOs provide a possible solution to food shortages, the effect of LMOs on our ecosystems is not yet fully known. To raise awareness and to create regulations for properly labeling LMO products, nearly 20,000 delegates from over 190 nations, businesses, and NGOs have gathered at the 12th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity in Pyeongchang, Gangwon-do Province. And according to the executive secretary of the convention, many still have long ways to go as they don't properly mark LMO products.
Several countries still don't have legislation on labeling, but this is an issue that the protocol promotes, is so that shipments containing LMOs should be labeled accordingly. And if so, they need to have the necessary expertise to conduct such risk assessments.
One of 3 environmental conventions under the United Nations, the event includes discussions on a project that President Park Geun-hye has been promoting of late. Among other agenda items, the building of a peace park inside a demilitarized zone will be a topic of discussion. Delegates will also discuss the feasibility of President Park Geun-hye's vision for the park, along with ways to get the North engaged in its development. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Pyeongchang.
Well, let's shift to a different topic. They say a growing number of elderly Koreans appear to be breaking away from long-held beliefs about marriage, divorce, and even death.
That's right. I mean, times are changing. A report by Statistics Korea says about 47% of those aged between 50 and 64 said they want to be cremated after death. That's nearly 3 times higher than the percentage of people who prefer to be buried, which used to be the norm. The age group, which includes the baby boomer generation, were also more progressive about marriage and divorce for that matter.
Right. More than 26% said that marriage was not a must, about 10 percentage points higher than those aged 65 and above. Nearly 42% were also open to the idea of divorce, which is in contrast to 75% of their elders who said divorce was out of the question.
Good evening, I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. It's currently raining outside here in Seoul and all over the nation, but we're not expecting large accumulations as well. Now, Seoul and the surrounding regions are expecting less than 5 millimeters, while slightly more of 10 is expected south of the central region through tonight. Now, as for tomorrow, the rain will clear out, but the clouds will remain along with some cool autumn breeze. Now, although it'll be a bit warmer than today, That goes for pretty much everywhere except for Jeju Island, where the rain will continue to fall until around noon. Now, as for the weather conditions at the Asian Games in Incheon, the current temperature is at 20 degrees, and the weather for tomorrow looks favorable as well, with the highs of 22 and a low of 15. Now, going over to our temperature readings for tomorrow. Seoul starts off the Tuesday morning at 14 degrees before reaching up to 24 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will see highs of 23 and 24 degrees. Now, moving over to other regions, Jeju Island peaks over to 24, while Dokdo hits 17, while Gangneung will top out at 16. Well, that's all for Korea. Now, here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And we've come to the end of our newscast. Thank you for staying with us. To our viewers in different time zones, have a wonderful day. This has been Daniel Chen.
And I'm Hyun-kyung. For those of you tuning in from Korea, hope you put a good end to your day. Daniel and I will be back same time tomorrow.